Now, while many tragedies have already occurred this year, these are some of the positive stories that have a happier ending than anyone expected. All these cases were solved this year, with the children being located and found, traumatized though safe, as well as their abductors being in custody. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and today's case is so exciting because it is more of an uplifting kind of story. And with these being all in this year that they were located, even though they were missing for a year or years, is so incredible. But I wanted to intertwine these cases because not only were they found the exact same month, but these children were all involved in familial abductions, which is something that is very common in child abductions, but something that we don't really cover a lot here on this channel. And it's something that can be even scarier because while you think, well, at least a stranger isn't with my child, sometimes that means that the person that you knew or were closest to, their parent, is now with them in a place that isn't maybe the best for them. And so that makes it even harder. And it also can be that investigators don't take it as seriously due to them being technically with family and then not being the stranger who is just trying to do harm. It's more likely that investigators can see this as, you know, a parent, a uncle, a family member isn't going to do them harm, but that's not always the case. And just being on the run in general is not healthy for children, obviously. So let's go ahead and get into the stories. So we're taking it back all the way to October 25th of 2018 when 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was in a mall in Vancouver, Washington. Now, she was actually in foster care at the time, but was on a supervised visit at the mall to see her mother, who was 22-year-old Esmeralda Lopez. Now, that day, her mother would actually ask the worker, the social worker who was there with them, if she could take Aranza to the bathroom that was in the food court. It was nearby, and this was allowed. However, the two would not return back to their seats. Now, missing persons posters described Aranza as having blonde or light brown hair, blue eyes, 3'4" to 3'6", and Hispanic. She was last seen wearing a long-sleeved dark blue shirt with a bulldog and blue, purple, and white striped pants, as well as Paw Patrol shoes. Her biological mother, Esmeralda, was believed to flee in a stolen car with an accomplice. And Esmeralda was believed to be wearing a red and white striped soccer jersey at the time. Now, the stolen car was described as a red Chevy Cobalt with Washington plates that were BLK 1552. Now, Aranza was actually said to be in the foster care system for about a year due to complaints that Esmeralda was abusing her. Now, officials had reported when they went and they examined these reports and examined the family, they found multiple bruises on her. And her mother also had a history of violence, as well as not getting help for mental health and having erratic behavior. And all of those combined meant that CPS did take Aranza from the home. But a year later, Esmeralda was believed to be doing better, and she was given twice weekly supervised visits to see her daughter, which meant that she was not ever alone with Aranza. She was not supposed to be alone for the entire visit. There was always some sort of social worker there. It was most likely in a public place. Short little visits so that they could see each other and hopefully work towards Esmeralda getting custody of her daughter once again.
I think our main concern is the allegation that she may go to Mexico, and that would obviously be a huge safety concern for a young child. There was quite a long delay from the time that the child was last seen with her till we were notified that this was even occurring. There's sort of multiple pieces to this because it was sort of an evolving puzzle that a few pieces started to fit together and were connected.
Now, the FBI began to work on this case immediately, offering about $10,000 for information, and a tip was received that on October 27th, which was 2 days after the abduction, the vehicle was spotted in Southern California. Now, along with Esmeralda and Aranza, this witness had also seen a female teenager, a girl that looked to be quite young as well. Now, the Vancouver police believed that they had already made their way across the border into Mexico. And the Amber Alert for Aranza was issued at this time because they believed that she was in danger due to her mother's violent history.
Authorities up and down the West Coast want you to see these photos. They fear 4-year-old Aranza Lopez is in danger and headed south. The California Highway Patrol issued an Amber Alert Saturday, 2 days after the girl went missing, along with her mom.
Aranza Lopez has blonde hair and blue eyes. The suspect is 5 feet tall, 138 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Call police if you see them.
Now, investigators began to look into the stolen car because that's really the only thing that they had to go on at this time. And this is when they would find evidence that was quite explosive in this case. They would find that inside of Esmeralda's apartment, 3 men had actually ambushed another man, tied him to a chair, and stole his car for Esmeralda. They were aware of this at this point because this man had actually broken free from the chair from the apartment and called the police.
Oh, there's a car right there.
A neighbor shot cell phone video of police and CERT teams. She says the robbery happened in this upstairs unit, which has since been empty. She's now realizing that smiling little girl on the news may be with the people behind that frightening scene.
Must be really scared.
This neighbor is also connecting the dots.
And when I saw the pictures, I had thought I had seen them at the pool during the summer. It makes you want to cry a lot, that's for sure.
But by the time he called, Aranza had already been kidnapped and they could not stop her from taking her. So the man that was allegedly abducted in all of this and whose the car actually belonged to was Jose Arellano Gomez, who said that he actually knew Esmeralda, that he had dated her before, and that she asked him to come to her apartment because she needed a ride somewhere. So he arrived and spoke to her for about 20 minutes, and then 3 men came in with masks and were carrying knives. He said that they took his credit card, his car, and they tied him up, and it took him 12 hours to free himself before having to jump from the 2nd floor window. Now, these 3 masked men were actually identified and arrested. This was 18-year-old Eric Garcia Valverde and 18-year-old Francisco Javier Hernandez Reyes, as well as 15-year-old Alejandro Zulu Sopu, who was not named until recently due to his age because he was only 15 at the time. But they were charged with first-degree kidnapping and first-degree robbery. Now, the 18-year-olds were booked in county jail, whereas the 15-year-old was taken to the juvenile detention center. Now, Eric was said to be kind of the leader, one of the 18-year-olds, and said that he knew Esmeralda was going to abduct Aranza and to also steal the car. That's why they stole it for her. He said that she had also bought clothes for Aranza to dress as a boy. He said that they'd actually plotted this kidnapping for about 2 weeks, but the plan was almost foiled when Esmeralda's own car got a flat tire, and that's when they decided to steal one from her ex-boyfriend. Now, the other 18-year-old Francisco, his lawyer tried to argue a lower bail due to his lack of criminal history, but this was denied. The 18-year-olds Eric and Francisco were sentenced to 17 months in prison, and Alejandro was given 129 weeks in the juvenile facility. But several weeks later, another one was added to the accomplices, and that was Sherry Francesca Figueroa, who turned herself in. She was the 16-year-old accomplice who was in the car with Esmeralda and Aranza traveling to Mexico. As far as Sherry, the case against her is still said to be pending. But a year later, Aranza's mother, Esmeralda, was actually found and arrested in Puebla, Mexico. She was extradited back to Washington. However, Aranza was nowhere to be found. By 2021, Esmeralda pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping, first-degree robbery, and first-degree custodial interference. And through a Spanish interpreter, she told the courtroom that she felt bad, she was sorry, but the judge said he was not convinced by this, did not accept her apology, and that she knew what she was doing when she was taking her daughter to another country. He said he wanted to impose a harsher sentence, but was restrained by the law. And he said that she shouldn't have taken Aranza to a place where she no longer knows where she's at. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison with 14 months of credit for time served, but she was also ordered to pay $1,500 for the stolen vehicle as well. And though she didn't want to give up the location of her daughter, she claimed that she didn't know about the whereabouts. She was said to be helping law enforcement try to find her. She claimed that Aranza was with family and safe in Mexico. but she remained missing at this time. Now, while Aranza was still being searched for, the next year in 2022 in Missouri, 2 more children would be kidnapped. You see, the Gilley family consisted of 38-year-old Blake Gilley, the father of 12-year-old Adrian and 11-year-old Brooke in Clay County. Now, Blake claimed that in March of 2022, they were visiting their mother, but she wasn't allowing him to speak or visit them. And at this time, they had joint custody, so he was legally allowed to visit them. And then he said he could not get a hold of her at all. He said he didn't know where they were. It was his biggest fear in the world, and it was an understatement to say he was terrified and freaked out. The mother and the 2 children were eventually reported missing, and the missing persons poster stated that Adrian had blue eyes, blonde hair, standing at 5'8" and weighing 80 pounds, and he also had Down syndrome and was nonverbal as well. Now, Brooke also had blue eyes, blonde hair, and also stood at 4'8" and 80 pounds. It was stated that they may be in the company of their mother. It turned out that Blake and the children's mother, Christy, had divorced back in 2016 and had originally had this joint custody agreement. However, when the children vanished, Blake was granted the full custody because Christy hadn't showed up to court when she needed to. And there was supposed to be this court date on April 14th of 2022. However, it's believed that instead of showing up, Christy just decided to abduct the children and take them to where they believed to be California. She did this without notifying anybody, without permission from the courts, and she had refused to cooperate with the courts with the decision to grant Blake sole custody. It was thought to be the motive of the kidnapping because Blake was working toward this sole custody agreement. According to Law and Crime, Blake had actually found out that back in March, when all this was going on, he couldn't get a hold of anybody, that the children's school records had been requested from where they lived in Missouri by a school in California. Now, the Missouri school claimed that these kids, Blake and Adrian, had recently been removed from the district, but not by Blake. So that led them to believe that they were in California. And so they knew that Christy's grandfather lived in California, and they wondered if possibly they were staying with him. And so the police in California actually did this welfare check. But when they arrived, they found that the entire family no longer lived there. Now, Detective Harmon ended up contacting Christy's court advocate for the custodial issues, and she would end up telling him that Christy would not be cooperating with the Clay County Court due to the violation of Christy's rights by refusing her right to due process. She said Christy told her the children were safe and being homeschooled, but they would not give the address for where they were staying. The Missouri police were trying to contact Christy directly or some member of her family to talk to her, but they were unable to speak to them. It was unknown where the children were, where their mother was. Christy, when living in Missouri, was living in Liberty with her sister, but she was no longer there. Her sister didn't know where she was. And by July 13th of 2022, 4 months since the disappearance, Christy Nicole Gilley had a felony kidnapping warrant issued against her. On June 19th of 2022, with this warrant, the police in California believed that they had found her residence, so they conducted a welfare check. Now, they would find Christy, Adrian, and Brooke, but the deputy claimed that the children were clean, they were healthy, and for whatever reason, she was not taken into custody, nor were the kids taken away. Almost a year after their disappearance, the High Springs Police Department in Florida would post to their Facebook page that Adrian Gilley and Brooke Gilley were located, as well as their mother. The police were actually working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to help bring them home, and that's exactly what they did. On February 1st of 2023, Florida police had been conducting a routine tag check on the vehicles in the parking lot of the Winn-Dixie grocery store, just a random store, and they came across a plate that identified the owner as a fugitive. High Springs police then entered the store to look for the owner, and they found Christy as well as Adrian and Brooke. They were all allegedly wearing disguises. Now, 36-year-old Christy was immediately detained and arrested, and she was being held in a Florida jail while awaiting extradition. Now, Adrian and Brooke were turned over to the Florida Department of Children and Services to be reunited with their father back in Missouri. But it was found that Christy had booked a nearby Airbnb to stay at, which is where they were currently living, but they hadn't been there the whole time. Blake would get his children back. Adrian and Brooke were home safe, but Blake claimed to the media that they weren't automatically feeling safe. He said that they were not physically harmed, but they were still in shock about this whole thing, and it was really bothering them. He would tell NBC News that the children would eventually talk to him about what had happened over that year and what they had gone through while being kidnapped. And even though it was their biological mother, this was not a fun family trip. You see, they were on the run. And Adrian and Brooke had told their father they had not been in school for the entire year. They were always moving. They were going from different Airbnbs and weren't ever allowed to go outside. And while they were kept inside for the most part, if they did go outside to take them somewhere, they were not allowed to speak to anybody or look anybody in the eyes. And they were never told where they were headed, where they were going. And anytime they were in the car, they had to have their heads down. Blake explained that ever since being reunited with the kids, it's been a time of healing. That Adrian, the little boy with Down syndrome, still puts his head down in the car or will just look down at the ground when he's walking outside and won't make eye contact. And Blake has, told him, hey, you're good, buddy, look up. Blake already has a plan to get them back into school ASAP, and he's also looking for counseling to give them a fighting chance at life. He said that the police actually deserve a lot of credit for finding his children after working their butts off. This was so recent, February 1st, and Christine Gilley is still said at this time to be in police custody in Florida. She has asked for a lawyer, and she could face felony parental kidnapping charges with a sentence of 1 to 4 years if found guilty. However, her lawyer, who is Maurice McDaniel, has claimed that she is fighting extradition because she wants to become a Florida resident. He stated that he spoke to her for an hour and she denied hiding her children in Airbnbs at all and telling her children not to interact with people. So it seems as though Christy is not owning up to what she has done, at least thus far in the case. But what about Aranza? What about the little girl kidnapped from the mall by her own mother? Well, there's not much information because everything is being kept hush-hush. But as of February 2023, Aranza Lopez was found as well. After 5 years missing, the now 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old, was located in Mexico. FBI claimed that they never gave up their search, and she was found, and I will write it on the screen, Mexico, by Mexican authorities. She has since been brought to the United States, and her exact location is being kept private for safety reasons. That is all we know. She is said to be healthy and safe as far as we know, and I don't know what's really to come for her next. If foster care is where she's going to be placed, if there's another family member willing to take her in. But 3 children returned home after years just this February. And both cases having to do with this familial abduction that is just so incredibly crazy. I will say that as someone whose family did foster care and hearing that a foster child was actually abducted during this supervised visit, that is the worst fear of social worker, but also the foster family. To hear that then that child has been abducted and cannot be located is even more horrific. And I think that that's kind of overlooked in cases like this. The foster family, I wonder if they will ask for her back 5 years later. I wonder if that would even be possible. But it is something to take into consideration in these things, that the foster family is her family at this time. And so I just wonder how that foster family is doing, if they will speak up and ask to see her again or ask to be placed with her again. We'll just have to see kind of where that goes. And this is currently all that is known in both of the cases, so I will keep you updated, and I'm hoping for a very safe and happy life for all of them after what they have gone through. I know this is a different way of formatting a video and kind of talking about a case and interweaving these 2 cases, but let me know if you liked it and if you want more like it. And if it kind of just uplifted your spirits to know that even in 2023, even with bad things happening, there are still good, and there are still people looking for missing people, and there are still missing people being located every day. So if you know somebody who has gone missing, even if it's been quite a long time, don't give up that hope. It is possible, and you just have to keep believing that it is possible, because even though Aranza was taken to a different country, she was still located as well. And that's, I know, one of the biggest fears is that if it goes into a completely different place, that, well, that just means she'll never be found. Well, she was. Her mother was arrested, she was found. But it is important to acknowledge that even though these children were found alive and safe, doesn't mean they won't need much therapy, even if it was someone that they initially believed was a safe person, initially believed loved them. There does come a time in situations of familial abductions where those children know that that's not safe, that they're not in an environment that a child should be. And so I truly hope that they get the help they need. And I know that Blake really seems to want to get that for his children. So I hope that somebody does the same for Aranza, because it doesn't seem like she has family members. So I hope that the foster system does so. However, as we know, that is something that they definitely lack, is getting help with mental health. And in fact, they push it to the back burner, they keep it hidden, and then they don't tell anybody that it's even happening. So my thoughts and wishes are with Aranza. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.